You know what they say, there's no list too specific for us. Welcome to Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 games that were released in November of 2016 that are all Owlboy. For this list, we're looking at the most fun, engaging, and enjoyable games that were released in the month following October and preceding December in the year 2016. Additionally, we're only considering games released within this time frame that are the game Owlboy, all of which anyone with the reading comprehension of a third grader should have been able to glean from the title of this video. You may be thinking that this entire introduction is needlessly redundant and time-wasting, but we here at Mojo just call that knowing our audience. Number 10. Owlboy. I think we can all agree that moments like Legend of Zelda saving the princess and storming Normandy wouldn't have been nearly as enjoyable if we weren't jamming out and bobbing our heads to some funky chiptunes. It's no secret that a soundtrack can either make or break a game, and to call Owlboy's soundtrack anything but pitch perfect would be an understatement. In addition to perfectly complementing the game's high-bit aesthetic, it hits all the right notes perfectly in time with the game's mood, and every area sounds refreshing and distinct. You might be wondering why Owlboy isn't higher on this list if its soundtrack moved us so much, but this isn't a musical top 10 list, you fucking retard. Number 9. Owlboy. What good are game mechanics without a story to suck you in? No good, I say, and that's why our pick for number 9 has to go to Owlboy by D-Pad Studios. Owlboy takes its time introducing the world and characters in such a way that the player gets ample time to understand and empathize with them, as well as understanding their relationships both with each other and with the world itself, so that by the time things really get moving, you're just as invested in their quest as they are. Not to mention the fact that just when you think you've got everything figured out, the game drops a bomb that'll leave you feeling like Nagasaki. It's a plot twist so good that we won't even spoil it here, not realizing the fact that by telling you there's a twist at all will diminish the surprise, but due to budget cuts, we here at Mojo have been sharing a solitary brain cell for the past few months, so can you really blame us? Number 8. Owlboy. Any gamer will tell you, it doesn't matter how fun a mechanic is, doing anything over and over again gets old eventually. Running, jumping, swinging a sword, hell, even swinging your own sword will leave you blind with hairy palms, which is why it's a blessing that D-Pad Studios ensured that Owlboy is constantly introducing new mechanics that build on the way you play. Whether it's by introducing new characters with their own unique personalities or mechanics, or temporarily changing the way the game plays entirely, Owlboy has variety to spare. And you know what they say, variety is the spice of life, which is why all of our videos are exactly the same. Number 7. Owlboy. What's a game without a good boss fight or two? Well, I'll tell you what it's not. It's certainly not Owlboy. Every boss fight in Owlboy scores perfectly on the Randy Jackson scale of firm but fair, constantly challenging the player without ever stepping into the realm of being cheap. However, it's not just the tight controls and appropriately scaling difficulty of these bosses that lands Owlboy at number 7 on our list. You see, much like Owlboy knows that the best way to keep a player interested is to change things up every once in a while, and as such, the bosses presented in this game vary wildly. Whether it's by making a slight mechanical change to the way the game is played, invading Poland, or briefly changing the game's genre entirely, Owlboy's bosses are sure to keep even the most veteran gamers on their toes. Number 6. Owlboy. Implicit bias is the bias and/or judgment that one typically feels towards others based on a variety of subtle cognitive processes, generally stemming from a place of similarity or familiarity. Implicit bias is generally used to describe a person's inherent preference for people and things that are similar to themselves, or are at least familiar to them due to the environment surrounding them during their upbringing, and is generally thought to operate at a subconscious level without the person's own awareness or thought. In psychology, implicit bias is most often used in relation to discussions about race, as studies have found that human beings tend to have an inherent and subconscious bias towards people who are visually similar to them. Number 5. Owlboy. You can't say game without saying gameplay, and gameplay is the exact reason that Owlboy snagged this spot on our list. The controls are tight and responsive and everything behaves exactly the way you would expect it to. The platforming and exploration are fun and intuitive, and there's enough going on to keep it interesting without overwhelming the player with a slew of mechanics that ultimately are never used anyways. Now, a lot of gamers will take this stuff for granted while they're playing it, but when you stop and really think about the way it's organized and presented, it's hard not to appreciate the sheer amount of time and effort that must have gone into designing it. We here at Mojo salute you, D-Pad Studios. Number 4. Owlboy. Unlike the other games on our list, Owlboy makes it for reasons that are much more subtle than things like excellent gameplay or an amazing soundtrack. You see, in a world of tedious tutorials and non-stop explanations, it's incredibly refreshing to have a game that treats the player like they wouldn't be able to count their IQ on 2 hands. Like, come on, game developers. Who on earth would want everything explained to them over and over again without the need for any level of cognitive critical thought of their own? Number 3. Owlboy. Owlboy is much more than a pretty face, but man if it isn't a pretty one. In addition to the great story and enjoyable gameplay, Owlboy is one of the prettiest high-bit style games we've played in our lives, let alone out of all the games called Owlboy released in the month of November in 2016. Every sprite and every environment has an absurd level of detail that shows just how passionate the artists at D-Pad Studios were about making this game. Now, obviously, graphics alone can't make a game great. Just ask the Wehrmacht soldiers from World War II that. Those stylish coats aren't saving you from the condemnation of history. However, as that example shows, a great aesthetic can definitely push you in the right direction, and that's why Owlboy lands this spot on our list. Number 2. Owlboy. There's a little something at the foundation of every great game that so often gets taken for granted by us gamers, and that's world building. The world that D-Pad Studios created in this breakout title feels totally and completely real, even with all the floating islands, and I think we all know that those don't exist. Every area feels distinctly lived in, as if it existed long before you got here and will continue to exist long after you've been devoured by the wild glares. When you're running around the world of Owlboy, it's very evident that lots of thought and care went into the details of how it would function. Unlike something like the Cars franchise, which just leaves you with questions like, how does currency work? Do cars have wallets? If so, where do they keep them? Why is racing the most popular sport in the world if running isn't the most popular sport in the real world? Wouldn't something like Demolition Derby be more popular? Are monster trucks just murderers? If car bugs are Volkswagen Beetles, but there are also people cars that are Volkswagen Beetles, does that mean that the people are giant monster insect people? Where do the lizard and bug cars get their gasoline? Are there little wild gas stations out in the wilderness? Does that mean that gas stations and buildings are naturally occurring? And if that's the case, then why didn't the road fix itself instead of lightning having to fix it manually? And if that's the case, then who put them there? How did they get gas before they were put there? How many different sizes of wild gas stations are there? It's gotta be pretty extensive. And how does gasoline even exist in the first place, since petroleum comes from decomposed organic matter? All of the creatures in cars are made of metal. Unless, wait, are cars made of flesh? Is that why they get old? Is that why they replace their tires? Because the flesh on contact with the asphalt tears them up over time? Is that like amputating your legs and getting new ones? How do the animals replace their tires? Is everyone in the Cars universe just in agonizing, unending, seething pain from shredding their flesh on the hot, rough asphalt?
Are planes and cars in the same universe? Can I get a clear fucking answer to this one?
What the fuck was I talking about? Oh yeah, number 1 is Aviary Attorney.